Hello, everybody, and welcome to All Blaze No Glory, the podcast. In this edition of All Blaze No Glory, the podcast, I'm going to review the two London games that took place at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Give a little bit of feedback about my weekends in London. It's quite special this year for me. It's the first time I've been to London with anyone apart from my grandpa for the NFL games. In 2021, I went by myself as I didn't really want to be with anyone else. I just wanted to be in my own thoughts, feeling that I was there with my grandpa, even though he wasn't physically there. My grandpa died in 2020. Prior to that, we'd been to every NFL game in London from 2013. So obviously I spent a lot of time, and I associate the NFL a lot with great memories with my grandpa. This time I went a slightly different route. So on the first weekend, the 2nd of October, which was a smashing game between the New Orleans Saints and the Minnesota Vikings, which finished 27-24 to the Minnesota Vikings, and there was a double doink to finish the game from the New Orleans kicker. It was a great game that I went to with my wife's best pal, and her husband Colin. Colin's a NFL fan. He hadn't been in years, so part of getting the tickets was to surprise him on behalf of his wife. So I was part of the task force that was to keep the games a secret from him. And it had an absolutely great weekend. We actually made a full weekend of it. Went down on the Friday, went to see Back to the Future, the musical, which, by the way, if you get the chance, go and see. It's honestly, it was mesmerising, absolutely incredible. And then on the Saturday, I went to Leyton Orient, which, if you followed the writing part of my page, you'll know as part of the list, which was things I wanted to do post-COVID, as a sort of way of putting a little bit of money back into things, but also just getting a bit of enjoyment and being out of the house. And I will do a written piece on Leyton Orient. I'm not going to do spend loads of time in the podcast talking about Leyton Orient. Suffice to say, I met the mascot, had a great time. Leyton Orient lost, but it was a great match. And if you are ever in London on a Saturday and you're looking for something to do, and you fancy a game of football, you'll get 20 quid's worth of football from Leyton Orient, probably more so than you'll get 40, 50, whatever it is, quid for one of the Premier League teams there. So definitely recommend a wee trip to Leyton. It's easy to get to from the middle of London on the tube as well. Anyway, part of this is not to talk about the games. I don't want to go back and forth talking about how good the games were, because most of you were either there, watched them, or you'll watch better podcasts, listen to better podcasts like Around the NFL, if you are interested in how the game actually went for a review. This is to talk about the actual experience of being there the first time with friends. So basically on the Sunday morning of the game, unfortunately my wife, Lynsey, was a little bit unwell and had to sort of sleep in. So Colin, Laura and I podded down, got into the queue for the shop, which I think is part of the experience of going to the NFL, even if you're not going to necessarily want to buy anything, because everything is quite expensive. Had a good look around the shop and made our purchases. I decided to get a Justin Herbert top, even though I'm a Rams fan, just because he's awesome, and he's always in my fantasy team. And Laura got herself a Green Bay top. We got a hoodie for Lynsey for when she turned up, a Vikings hoodie. Laura got a Saints hoodie, so they were supporting opposite teams. And it was nice. We went to the shop, then we went and queued up to get in to the sort of upper part, which I didn't realise Tottenham actually have a sort of little sort of fan zone just outside the entrances of the doors we were going in, which was really cool. They had all these sort of big helmets that you could go and get your photo taken in or beside. I did not choose to go in them, I have to say, but Laura and Colin did, and they've got some smashing photos of that. And then the Saints sort of brass band turned up and were entertaining the crowd with all sorts of tunes and stuff. It was just a really nice atmosphere, some food, some beer, and it was great. Then we got into the stadium, went to find our seats. By this point, Lynsey had shown up. She was feeling better, so we got some drink in the stadium. The only thing, and it's my biggest bugbear with Tottenham, is I don't know who thought these glasses that fill from the bottom were a good idea, but maybe in season 1 they were a great idea. They are the leakiest glasses you can imagine. They stick them on this thing. There's a little sort of rubber bit at the bottom that bursts open so you can fill the beer in from the bottom. They say it's to give you the perfect pour, so it pours quickly and all the rest of it. I got one that was more head than pint, and the guy had to fix it for me. They should just go to what Murrayfield do, the 6-glass filler, and fill it from the bottom, like with the tube inside, unlike like a normal sort of setup. I don't know why they thought that this is a good idea. So anyway, that's just a little side point. But what was really good was actually that both games that I went to were really exciting. And the first game started off a little bit one-sided to Minnesota, but then the Saints fought back. So it made it exciting, because that's part of the experience. If a game's one-sided, it becomes a bit of a slugfest, and the atmosphere dies a little bit. And anyway, I thought at that point, we were sort of a good bit through the game, let's ask the wives, I hate to use it like that expression, but Laura and Lynsey, about what they were feeling, because they weren't really NFL fans. And I was interested to find out if they were actually enjoying the game, or they were really just there because Colin and I wanted to be there. So we'll just zip over to that interview now.
So I'm live at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium with the lovely Lynsey Gray and Laura Beveridge. First off, Lynsey, wifey, how are you enjoying your experience so far?
Yay, sports.
Brilliant. Thanks for elaborating so much in that question. And Laura, you've been here a bit longer than Lynsey. Lynsey, I was a bit sleepy this morning. How are you enjoying yourself?
Absolutely loving it. Americans everywhere, photograph opportunities everywhere, and amazing music inside the stadium. Loving it. Also enjoying the guys' warm-up on the field.
I'll find out what she said after I come back there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get you guys after the game, and you can tell me if you come back again. Is that okay?
Yep. Go sports team. Go sports. Whoop, whoop.
I do apologise for the sound quality of that. It was a little bit dodgy, but you got the gist. It was in stadium. There was a lot of excitement, and I was glad to hear that both Lynsey and Laura seemed to be enjoying the game, as well as Colin and I. As I say, it does help that it's a good close game, because when it starts to get kind of one-sided and one team's just running the ball and the other team's not doing very much, it can be a little bit boring. We went back to our hotel after the game, or our apartment, tried to put on Red Zone, had the world's worst Wi-Fi, so got a kind of pixelated Sega Mega Drive type version of a view of Red Zone, which wasn't ideal. However, we made the most of it, had a nice night, a couple of beers, far too much pizza, and genuinely just enjoyed the night. The following morning, the Monday, we were actually flying back up, but we decided to go into King's Cross, as Lynsey had found a place that was suitable for celiacs called Caravan, for us to go to for some food. Unfortunately, Caravan had food that had about 18 syllables for each component, so we swiftly dodged that after having some sorbet there, and went to find alternative sources of sustenance. However, whilst we were in Caravan, I did manage to speak to Lynsey and Laura again and find out what their post-game views were, having now experienced the full thing.
So we're now in Caravan near King's Cross in London. I've got my lovely wife Lynsey with me, and her bestie Laura Beveridge, bridesmaid extraordinaire. So you've now been to your first NFL game in full. Describe your experience.
It was amazing. Atmosphere was brilliant. Sport not so much. If you could have rugby playing with American football atmosphere, that would be the perfect sport to watch. Also, shout out to Tottenham for the awesome ladies' toilets. Plenty of them. But yeah, good.
Was that a shot at Murrayfield?
It was.
Fair enough. And Laura, yourself, how was your experience?
I absolutely agree with Lynsey. It was incredible. The atmosphere was fabulous. The fans' support was amazing. All of the fans were fabulous. I actually agree with the rugby comment. I think rugby is much more fun, much more fast. But the final quarter of that game had me on the edge of my seat. I really did think that Saints were going to come through. And as a result of this game, I now have an NFL team.
Oh, there you go. A new Saints fan.
So, after that, we went on our way home, and that was the end of week 1, or week 4 of the NFL, but week 1 of the NFL London games. The following week, Colin and I were still going. We were going together, just leaving on the Saturday this time, a little bit less time for activities. And we flew down and met Laura's brother, Mark Ingram. I think he's the original Mark Ingram, but I need to check their dates of birth. I had one spare ticket who I was glad to give to a German guy who I met through one of the NFL sort of groups, who had a great time when he turned up. We had a couple of beers together, had a good bit of a laugh. He was actually flying back to Stansted that night and met Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay quarterback, for those of you who don't know, on the way back. So he was absolutely thrilled with his experience to get a ticket at the last minute. So it was a totally different experience for me, but again, I was with someone else who was doing their first trip to the NFL, and Mark Ingram. He had never been to an NFL game before. Green Bay fan. He's a season ticket holder for Celtic and stuff, so we did have a little bit of a chat about that. He's mad, and he's sort of... we call it soccer, I suppose, when I'm talking about American football to differentiate, but he's mad into football. So this was his first time really at something like the NFL, and it was good to chat to him and just find out how he was enjoying the experience. I caught him before the game actually started, just to see how he found it so far, and I got him after the game as well. So here he is before the game.
So it's pre-game. I'm joined by Mark Ingram, brother of Laura. Mark, your first NFL experience, how are you enjoying it so far?
Oh, I'm so excited. The atmosphere is incredible. The fanfare, wonderful. The Yanks just know how to put it on. Put on a show.
And you're sporting Green Bay colours. You're a Green Bay fan. How did you become a Green Bay fan?
Because they're playing green, white and gold, and I like cheese. Come on, the cheeseheads!
So we'll join back with Mark after the game and see how he enjoyed his first game.
Before we go to Mark's post-game interview, I have to confess that I thought when I was editing this earlier on that it was the background noise in the stadium that was the problem, in terms of how loud the interviews were compared to these little links. I'm now listening back to the Mark interview and realise that I just kind of shout during these interviews, and it must be something innate in my head that thinks I've got to shout over the noise of the stadium. So I can only apologise for the up and down nature of the volumes in this. I'm doing my best to try and get them on the level, but I'm not that technical, so it's as good as I can get it, basically. However, Mark was clearly excited before the game, and despite Green Bay's misfortune in the second half of the game, Mark came away with a positive outlook at the NFL, and we discussed that after.
So game finished 27-22 to the Giants with the Packers, but I'm now joined by Mark Ingram, first NFL live experience. How did you enjoy that?
I absolutely loved the experience. I didn't love the result, but the atmosphere in the game was just incredible.
And so this was your first time at the NFL, but I know you're a big Celtic man. How did that stack up in terms of atmosphere?
Oh, listen, the atmosphere in the game was fantastic. I would say that it only beats maybe a Celtic St Mirren game, but it was a great atmosphere for an alternative sport. You know, you can't really compare it to the proper football.
And so just while I got you here, Celtic, do you think they're going to win the league this year?
Out the park.
Brilliant, thank you.
I think it's probably fair to say that Mark enjoyed his first NFL experience and had a great time. I'm not sure about this comparison between Celtic versus St Mirren and the atmosphere at the NFL games, but I'll take his word for it because I've never been to a Celtic Park game. In fact, I've never been to a Celtic game. I know that Colin's been pretty silent on these podcasts, and you're probably wondering, who is Colin? Is he someone fictional you've made up so you have friends? No, Colin was there. However, he said that he didn't want to be on the podcast. He's a long-time listener of the podcast. But he didn't want to be on it. I guess it's don't meet your heroes, or don't do podcast interviews with your heroes for Colin. Anyway, I'm talking myself up too much. But whilst we were down in the bar after the game, the bar was showing the New York Jets Miami Dolphins game, and we bumped into another group from Scotland. In fact, they had a friend over from Chicago with them, and we got chatting, and one of them agreed to do an interview with me just to talk about their experiences of the NFL. His name was Chris, and it was great to chat. He was a really nice guy. His only, I suppose, problem was he was a Washington Commanders fan, although after this Thursday I'm sure he's pretty pleased with himself. Let's just flip over to that interview now.
So it's a post-game after the Green Bay Packers and the New York Giants. I'm joined by Chris, a Washington fan. What the hell took over you, Chris?
For Washington, first televised Super Bowl in the UK, Washington, LA. My brother took LA. I've only got one way to go, haven't I? So that's been me for the last 30 odd years, you know.
Brilliant. And how many times have you been to London before?
This is about the 7th time I think we've been here, something like that.
And we just saw a game that was pretty good. It went down to the wire. How did that stack up compared to the other games you've seen in London?
That was a pretty good game, got to say, yeah. We've seen some decent ones, we've seen a couple of blowouts, but yeah, that was a good game. That's up there, it compares with them, yeah.
Brilliant. And just if we were to rank that one amongst all the games you've been to, how would that stack up?
That's it's got to be a top 3 one, that one. Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
My big man G here. Dave come over from America. His friend Carden flew in yesterday for the States. Top quality. Great weekends.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you to Chris for coming on. Hope you do get to hear this. I appreciate that it's taken me almost a week to edit this since we spoke. Unfortunately, it was busy at work. Trying to cram 5 days of work into 4 because you've taken days off for the NFL is not the easiest. In terms of the NFL itself, I would definitely recommend that if you get the opportunity for a ticket, you go and experience it, because it is something completely different to what you'll experience in most other sports. Yeah, there is that thing. It's all very American and there's a lot of pageantry and stuff, but I think that's what makes it great. The sport itself and the athletes themselves are actually incredible athletes. Some of the things that they can do, the body control in the air, the ability to catch balls in traffic and all that sort of stuff, it's hard to fathom even on TV, but when you see it live, it's like, whoa, how did that happen? Yeah, get yourself to an NFL game if you can. In terms of the podcast itself, I'm going to be doing my swim soon, so that will be a bit of an episode. It might be a bit of a video thing that I do as well, that I promised I would do when I was on with John in the last podcast, or 2 podcasts ago, as I had a rant on the last podcast, although I've been told it wasn't quite a rant by some of the people that listen. I will be doing a review after week 6, maybe after week 7, to be honest with you, with Kenny, who was on at the start when we're talking fantasy, just having a look at some of the fantasy stuff and maybe some of our predictions as to who might make the playoffs. We're going to keep it a bit shorter this time, so if you got a bit kind of sleepy during the last one that lasted an hour, it shouldn't be as long as that. And additionally, I'm hoping to speak to some people about some sort of more niche sports, and if you're someone who would like to talk to me about some more niche sports, then please do so. Shout out to everyone that's been a guest so far. Shout out to you guys for listening. I just do this for a bit of fun. I do like the sound of my own voice, I have to concede, but I'm kind of enjoying these and getting some of the feedback that I have got, so any feedback is appreciated. Thanks so much, and have a good rest of the week until the next one's out. Thank you very much.